Hi, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Ascend Career Consulting, where I help people with their career, starting with college and graduate admissions, ranging to job applications and interviews. My name is Justin. I previously graduated from Cornell University for my college degree and London Business School for my MBA. And throughout this entire time, I've tutored many students to accomplish their educational and professional goals. Today, I want to talk about a successful 2021 Harvard Common App essay that was published on the Crimson Brand Studio website, which is publicly available on Google. And I want to break down its elements to really uncover what a high quality Ivy League essay really contains. Now, there's a lot of general help out there about college admissions and how to write a good essay, but I don't really see anyone actually breaking it down step by step on how these authors were able to craft such a high impactful essay that got them that acceptance letter. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be reviewing it. I'm going to be talking about, some of these major themes, their writing styles, and ultimately, I hope you're able to draw some insights that you'll be able to apply to your own application and your own essay. Now, please note that this essay that I'm about to review does not belong to me. It belongs to the original author, and that the views that I express in this video are solely my own, and that the analysis is subjective. So the original author could have had, a different experience or different interpretations of their own writing that could be different from mine. But with that said, if you have more questions, see the disclaimer below, and otherwise, let's get started. Okay, so here is the Harvard essay that I was talking about, and I've divided it into two parts so that we can analyze it in two different sections in the video. I've color-coded some of the key items, one in yellow, which represents some of the highlights of writing prose that I'll talk about. And the stuff in green is around some of the major themes that the author is trying to express and where I think there could be a lot of insights for you if you're someone that's trying to craft your own essay. So with that said, I'm going to pause the video here just for a couple seconds so that you guys can pause on your end so that you can just read the essay for part one on your own. And then we'll come back and we'll discuss. All right. So hopefully by now you've read this first part of the essay. And I'll kind of start off with the first thing that I've highlighted here, which is the very first sentence, which is, quote, "I have a fetish for writing." Now, when I read this essay, I get so excited to just see what, students are interested in. And I think many admissions officers feel the same, which is why the very first sentence of an admissions Common App essay really, really needs to matter. In fact, a great first sentence or first two sentences need to be, in my opinion, short, punchy, emotional, and bold, right? And you get a lot of that just from this first sentence. So let's break this down. The author says, "I have a fetish for writing." Now, what does that really, when I read this and as I'm reviewing this, this instantly brings to mind, oh, well, why does this author have a fetish for writing? What sort of, did he always have this or she always have this? Did they sort of develop it, throughout through a certain experience? I'm very curious to learn more. So what this sentence is really, it's setting up a lot of questions for the reader to be engaged in and to really try to dig deeper into for the rest of the essay. Secondly, I think the sentence does a really good well in word choice. So the author uses the word fetish. And I think that word has a lot of emotion attached to it. And it's a very bold sort of choice of word for this sort of interest, right? The author didn't just say, oh, I'm interested in writing or I really like writing. No, they have a fetish for writing. And that sort of emotional and bold choice of language really accentuates that interest from the reader. So when you're thinking about first sentences, think about how you can really grab the reader's attention by, making those sentences, relatively short. In my opinion, I think those work great. But also the word choice that you use big sort of emotional words, right? Like fetish, like other adjectives that really bring that sentence to life. So the second part, you go through the first paragraph, all is good, it's very well written. But here, when we stop to the first green highlight, it reads, after all, when I practice my handwriting, I am crafting characters, period, my character. Now, this is really the first sort of theme, primary theme, which I'll characterize of this author's essay. And this primary theme is that their interest in handwriting is also a representation of themselves. As they say, they are physically crafting and drawing characters, but the way that they do so, right, ultimately is a representation of who they are as a person, and that is something that they will discuss further into the essay. So what I want you guys to take away from this is whenever you're writing a Common App essay, it is so critical to have a primary theme that acts as a vehicle or a mechanism to talk about all the other things that you want to talk about, right? So handwriting is just, it could be a hobby, it's probably a hobby. It could be, something else that's very relevant to this author, but really they're just using handwriting almost as if it's like the foundation of which they describe many other things that is, representative of them. Now, you don't have to do handwriting. I think this is very smart and very unique, which is probably why a lot of the Ivy League admissions officers, took note of it. But you could talk about anything, for example, like sports. You could be a volleyball player. So volleyball could be your primary theme. You could talk about music, playing an instrument. You could talk about a particular experience you had, let's say skydiving. Um, all in all, what's important is that you have to have a primary theme that's one, unique and relevant to you, but two, it needs to be able to act as a foundation to describe other things in your life and what you want to convey to the admissions officers. So as we move on to the second yellow area, right, it reads, after all, characters are the building blocks of language, and language is the only vehicle through which knowledge unfolds. Thus, in a way, these letters under my pen are themselves representations of knowledge, and the delicate beauty of every letter proves visually the intrinsic beauty of knowing. Now, just pausing there, I mean, I think this is just masterfully written. When you read something like this, if an admissions officer is reading this, or even as someone like myself who's reading this, what I immediately feel, right, is that this author is quite mature in their writing, and I mean mature because the way that they describe concepts, the way that they use metaphors, adjectives, right, all flows into this one sort of scenic imagery in your mind. And I think that's really important, right? When they describe characters are the building blocks of language. I think that's one, very accurate, but two, it's just such a great way to put that understanding and that concept, right? So when you're reading this essay, even if the admissions officer, is going really fast, the feeling that they get immediately because of how well written it is that basically this author is very mature in the writing and in their thinking and their intellectual capacity to be able to describe characters that way and connect it to language. I think that's really important. And we'll talk about how to actually break down this prose into such a way in a future video, but just to call that out here, I think it's really important when you think about your own writing and how you're able to maturely describe concepts and themes that you want to. So finally, on part one, this final sentence, I suppose handwriting reminds me of my conviction in this visual manner. Through learning, answers are found, lives enriched, and societies better. Now, I've highlighted this in green because what this sentence really is saying is it's telling the reader that there is another secondary theme that the author is trying to convey. And that secondary theme is this passion for learning, right? This is really important because the Common App essay generally is, not the longest essay you'll ever write, you're really limited to, I would argue, two main themes, right? You have the primary theme, which is sort of the interest, hobby, or some sort of experience that is really enticing, engaging for the reader and acts as the foundation by which you explain other things. But the secondary theme is really a certain value that you want to express to the admissions officers. And this value will change by person to person. So for this particular author, I would interpret that the value that they're trying to communicate is that, they love learning, right? And they love learning, and that value is connected to the fact of handwriting, of how handwriting is physically manifested, but also even the technique in handwriting is one way that shows that this author is quite interested in learning, right? And the author will describe a little bit more, which we'll talk about in part two. But this is really important because I think when you go through and think about your own essay, you need to describe one, right, that primary theme, what is really interesting about you, but two, how does that interesting thing about you actually relate to an underlying value that you have, and hopefully that value should be consistent with what, college admissions are looking for, right? So a value could be learning, a value could be teamwork, a value could be other sort of pursuits and values that these colleges have. So this is really important to kind of align your interests, your values, right, to the way that you're writing it, and to the experience or hobby, or whatever your primary theme is. All right. So this really, I think overall, it really sets a great, I would say part one sets up what the rest of the essay is going to talk about. And it's going to dive a bit deeper into this particular individual itself. But I think this is a really solid part one so far. So let's move to part two. And similarly, what I'll do is I'll pause the video now, and for a couple seconds and let you read part two before we continue. All right, so hopefully that's enough time for you to read part two. Similarly, we're just going to go through each of the highlighted sections and talk about what some of the insights are. So starting with the first one, the author now quotes another person, says, quote, "We must know the mathematician David Hilbert." Now, I've highlighted this because I think it was a very, very interesting choice to use a quote from a mathematician. This is quite surprising to me, actually, as an initial reviewer, because the original primary theme that we've talked about is handwriting, which is such a unique art form that requires, a lot of emotional technique, and it's very humanities sort of driven. So to contrast that with a quote from a mathematician suddenly really piques my interest, because what I'm thinking when I'm reading this is that, oh wow, this person not only is interested in the arts but also in the science, in the mathematics, which is a really great way of subtly showing that this author is quite well-rounded as an individual, right? They could have easily put in a quote from sort of a liberal arts leader in the world, and sort of connected that, or even a person that is connected to calligraphy or writing, but instead they juxtapose basically what they're interested in that primary theme against another aspect of the world, and this through the mathematician David Hilbert. I think this is really expertly done because it shows not only that this author is thinking in many, many different dimensions, but is also able to connect many, many dimensions in their writing, right? So that's really interesting for the reader. So when they go through the next sort of paragraph, they talk about different types of Chinese styles, handwriting styles, right? And there's a couple of things that I've highlighted here. Basically, each particular style has served this author very well. For example, when they try to prove a mathematical statement, whether they've spoken before a committee of Model United Nations delegates, or whether it's related to an art form, whether when they deliver a line on stage. So what's happening here really, I think, is something that I preach a lot, which is basically showing, not telling in many ways. And it's also what I call sort of the subtlety of 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 bragging. What I mean by this is that what the author is doing here is trying to subtly show all of the sort of accomplishments, well-rounded accomplishments that they have going on in their life, right? So this person clearly is very sort of very smart in the fact that they're able to prove a rigorous mathematical statement, right? And again, that was in contrast to this beautiful, elegant art form of handwriting. Secondly, they're able to, speak before a committee of model United Nations. So that communicates that, this person has probably good public speaking skills. This is another extracurricular that they've done, and speaking before a committee means that they've probably served at some level, some high level within, maybe their club at school or something along that lines. And then finally, the last part, when they deliver a line on stage, I mean, this could be, maybe they did some theater or some sort of acting. Basically, it's another sort of way, right, that they are able to express that they've done a particular activity, right? But I think what's very important in this is that they don't just tell you that, oh, I attended, I was the president of the committee of Model UN nation, and because of that, I was able to, I was given this opportunity to talk in front of a bunch of delegates. They didn't tell you specifically, oh, like I also did theater, right? And I was, maybe an acting director or like the top um, or a theater person in my school. Instead, what they do is they wrap these sort of subtle messages, right, in the context of their original primary theme, which is handwriting, and they're trying to connect different parts of their life, right, to that theme. And it's very clear as a reader to me that, this person is thinking quite deeply as to how they are essentially looking at their hobbies as well as their interests, right? And they're not just telling you, but they're kind of weaving that narrative in through, connecting it with that, the different types of styles of handwriting. I think that's very clever. And they're also selecting things that are quite different from each other, right? Theater is different from public speaking, which is different from math. So, when you think about your own essay, think about what other portions of yourself are quite diverse, and how can you put that in, write that in subtly through again that primary central theme that you've chosen in the beginning. Okay, finally, we get to the final section, which is, we will know. Herbert finishes his adage. I must know, for knowing, like well-crafted letters, has an inherent beauty and intrinsic value. I will know, for my versatile interest in academics will flow like my versatile styles of writing. I must know and I will know, for my fetish for writing is a fetish for learning. Now, and this is just such a great way, I think, to end off this essay. I think this is what I'll call a callback. Basically, what they're doing, right, is number one, in the first quote by Hilbert, they're calling back to the original quote. So as David Hilbert probably addressed the German scientists in 1930. This is how Herbert is finishing his address, and this is how the author is also finishing his address, which is in this case the essay. Now, I think what's clever here is that from a writing perspective, this author is taking Hilbert's language basically, which is I must know, I will know, and using that right as a way to impart his final message, which is that he's interested in writing. He's also very interested in learning, and I think that final sentence, I must know and I will know, for my fetish for writing is a fetish for learning. I think that is a perfect way to summarize his two main themes, right? His first primary theme has been his interest for writing, particularly handwriting, and his secondary theme is really, is really just his passion or their passion. Sorry, it could be she or her, she or him, for their learning, and I think that's such a great way to end off. All right, so I hope this has been really helpful for you. I want to summarize basically the key four takeaways from this essay. The first of which is when you're writing this essay, you need to have a primary theme that acts as a mechanism or a vehicle to describe everything else that you want to do. And this theme, this primary theme should be very, very unique to you, right? It should be it could be an experience, it could be a hobby, could be, a relative, it could be someone that you mentored with. It could literally be anything, but it needs to be unique and it needs to be really specific to you. The second key takeaway is that you should have a secondary theme, right? And that secondary theme should be some sort of value that you have that you want to express to the admissions officers. And hopefully that value aligns with the values of a particular college that you are interested in. For example, Harvard is, like almost all the other schools, but I think Harvard in particular really values when students can show that intellectual curiosity and be able to demonstrate that, through their essay, right? So that might be one reason why this particular author has selected learning in their passion for learning for this for their essay. But again, this could be anything else. For example, let's say your primary theme was about volleyball, and your secondary theme could be about teamwork and learning from other talented individuals, right? College is another great way to be surrounded by like-minded individuals, learning from professors. You could connect that, to your coaching experience in volleyball. Things like that could all be, related and definitely, doable. So again, think about what sort of secondary theme you want to express in your essay. The third main takeaway is, again, the subtlety of showing, not telling, right? Even within your essay, you should be able to show how, well-rounded and diverse you are, but not through a sort of lists like you would do in a resume. You want to show this through, again, through the primary and secondary themes that you've selected. And like this author did, right, is be able to weave that into the narrative. Right. And you don't have to say so specifically, oh, I did X, right? But just say, hey, this relates to an activity that I did, right? It could be a metaphor even. It could be, you say like handwriting is similar to like let's say the fleeting footsteps of when I dribble a soccer ball, something like that. I know that doesn't probably make a lot of sense in this context, but the idea basically by saying you can use similes, metaphors, things like that to describe other activities that you do in your life, right, in your essay, that can subtly show that you have a lot of other interests, extracurriculars, academic, excellence. That's really important. And finally is, how to end your essay. So, I really like the use of callbacks, which is really just, ending your essay in a very similar way as to how you started, right? Using, the ending of, let's say, if you use a quote from a speech from someone like this author did, ending it with a quote from like that speech and connecting that, to your essay and your overall theme. I think that's really powerful. And so being consistent basically all the way to the end is, extremely important. So if you hopefully like this video, please, subscribe, like the video. I'll be doing a lot more of these. I find these so interesting to do, not only for myself. I love reading different students' essays. I admire really all of these people who write such beautifully crafted essays, and it's so interesting to see their lives and their interests. I think that's such a blessing. And I hope hopefully this video is helpful to you to uncover a little bit on what makes, a high quality Ivy League essay, what it is. And stay tuned for more videos. So we'll catch you on the next time.